All right, joining us now to react, Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, thank you, as always, for taking time on a weekend. We're seeing these Tesla protests popping up coast to coast. We've got one here in Washington, not very big, but people turning out to exercise their First Amendment rights. But what do you make of sort of the largely Democrat reaction to specifically targeting Elon Musk and in Tesla because of Doge?
Griff, thanks for having me on. Protest is legal. Violence and vandalism is not. And I went on Fox a couple weekends ago and condemned violence or vandalism against Tesla dealerships, but absolutely support the right and even the imperative of people to protest against Elon Musk. He brought these peaceful protests onto himself. He brought his business into politics, so he should not be surprised when politics comes for his business.
Yeah, fair point. I don't know if you were able to catch any of the Doge interview my colleague Brett Baird did over the past 2 nights. Really sort of insightful there. And you heard some specific incidences of waste, fraud, and abuse that they're targeting in certain departments. Do you think that the criticism by some of your Democrat colleagues just saying all Doge, everything Musk is doing is bad, or do you oppose him even attempting any of this?
When the president announced Doge right after his election, I was one of the first Democrats to say that if Elon Musk wants to work in a bipartisan, sensible fashion to eliminate waste, fraud, or abuse in the federal government, of course, I am here because government should be focused on outcomes. It should be judicious stewards of the taxpayer dollar, and it should not get bogged down in process. We need to be building more clean energy. We need to be building more housing. We need to be delivering more innovation to the American public. But I also warned that if Elon Musk came after Social Security, we were going to fight him tooth and nail. And lo and behold, what does he do? He comes out with absolute lies, bold-faced lies, Griff, about Social Security, and he tries to close a Social Security office in my district in Fall River, Massachusetts. And he is not touching Social Security. Democrats will not let him.
Well, what lies specifically, Congressman, are you talking about?
Excuse me, Griff, what laws or what lies?
What lies? Yeah, you're saying that he's saying lies about, because I thought what was interesting when we heard from the Social Security Doge person, he was pretty enlightening as to what he found. In fact, here, let me play you. I think we have a soundbite of it.
All we talk about is how unpopular Donald Trump is. But in reality, he's basically more popular than he was at any point in term number 1 and more popular than he was when he won election. When you compare Trump against him.
All right. Sorry, Jake. That's the wrong soundbite. I've confused the control room there. But basically what the individual on Musk's team working at Social Security was saying was that some 40% of the calls they're getting are fraudulent. Seems like a piece of information that is beneficial to know now that Musk put someone inside there.
Is there fraud related to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? Usually people taking advantage of elders? Of course that happens. That is not the lies that Elon Musk is putting forward, though. What he put forward via Donald Trump in the joint address to Congress is this idea that there are millions of individuals who are fraudulently receiving benefits long after their date of death. That is not true. And it is a pretext for them to try to privatize Social Security. The Republicans tried to do it under George W. Bush. Senator Scott from Florida wants to do it again, and he is working with Musk to lay the groundwork for it. We are not going to let them privatize Social Security with the pretext of there being massive fraud, because there is not.
Well, we'll see where it goes. And the Social Security Doge guy talking about the specific number of people that are receiving benefits that are old. But we'll leave it there. Congressman Jake Auchincloss, thank you for taking time. We'll see where it all goes. Have a good weekend.
Be well.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.